Thank you very much. We're signing an executive order. I consider it to be a very important executive order. It's about keeping families together, while at the same time being sure that we have a very powerful, very strong border, and border security will be equal, if not greater, than previously. So we're going to have strong, very strong borders, but we're going to keep the families together. I didn't like the sight or the feeling of families being separated. There's a problem that's gone on for many years, as you know, through many administrations, and we're working very hard on immigration. It's been just left out in the cold. People haven't dealt with it, and we are dealing with it. So step by step, just like we dealt with North Korea, we dealt with Iran, we dealt with an economy that was heading in the wrong direction, we dealt with a lot of different problems. This is one that has been gone on for many decades. So we're keeping families together, and this will solve that problem. At the same time, we are keeping a very powerful border, and it continues to be a zero tolerance. We have zero tolerance for people that enter our country illegally. With that, I'd ask Mike Pence, Vice President, if he'd like to say anything.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. And I think what the President's made clear is we believe it's a false choice between whether we are a country of law and order, a country with borders, and a country that demonstrates the compassion and the heart of the American people and respect for families. By taking this action, the President will make it possible for us to continue to engage in enforcing the law against individuals who violate our law, come into our country illegally, but now we'll be able in that prosecution in the immediate days forward to keep families together as that goes forward. But we are calling on Congress to change the laws in this regard and in a broad range of areas that will secure our borders and give us strength and confidence that we are once again going to take the steps necessary to end the crisis of illegal immigration in America.
I think the word compassion comes into it, but it's still equally as tough, if not tougher. Secretary Nielsen, would you like to say
I just thank you for your leadership, sir. We look forward and expect the House to act this week. We ask them to do their job. The laws need to be changed. This is a problem that president after president has dealt with for decades. This one is willing to stand up and fix it. We ask Congress to do their part. Thank you, sir, for your leadership.
Thank you very much. Great job. Okay. You're going to have a lot of happy people.
Thank you, sir.
President, why did you wait so long to keep this coverage?
This has been going on for 60 years. 60 years. Nobody's taken care of it. Nobody's had the political courage to take care of it, but we're going to take care of it. But it's been going on for a long time.
Do you think you're backing down? Critics
No, the border is just as tough, but we do want to keep families together. This is a problem. If you look at some of those horrible scenes from a few years ago, to me they were horrible scenes. They were just terrible, and that was during the Obama administration. Other administrations have had the same thing. We're keeping the family together, and so this is it. And also, there may be some litigation. We're also wanting to go through Congress. We will be going through Congress. We're working on a much more comprehensive bill. A lot of good things are happening toward immigration and proper immigration, but we have to have strong borders, and ultimately we want to see it done right, and it will be done right. But what we have done today is we are keeping families together. The borders are just as tough, just as strong. They can come in through ports of entry if they want. That's a whole different story. And that's coming in through a process, and the process is what we want. So I want to thank you all very much. I think this is something that makes us Thank you very much, everybody. We'll get the wall. We'll get the wall done. We'll get the wall done. Yes?
photos of the children being separated from their
No, Ivanka feels very strongly. My wife feels very strongly about it. I feel very strongly about it. I think anybody with a heart would feel very strongly about it. We don't like to see families separated. At the same time, we don't want people coming into our country illegally. This takes care of the problem. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
Mr. President, why don't you take you a few days to sign?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Caitlin.
Come on, Caitlin.
She's doing a great job.
Thank you. Come on, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so there you have it. The president there sitting in the Oval. He has officially signed this executive order keeping families together. But let me just be totally transparent with you and say we didn't really get a heads up on what would be in the substance of this executive order. What exactly does this mean? Does this affect the zero tolerance policy? What exactly happens to all these families and children? So we don't entirely know yet. So just that said, let's work with what we do know. Carrie Cordero is with me, our CNN legal analyst, and Gloria Borger is back, our chief political analyst. Just being real with everyone. We don't know a ton. But Carrie, to you, we don't know what's in this. When we were talking, when we were watching the tape, you were saying he didn't actually need to sign an executive order. What do you mean by that?
That's exactly right. So first of all, we haven't read the order yet, but the president did not need to sign any executive order in order to end the crisis that's taking place right now, which is children being separated from their families, young children being separated from their families. He didn't need to do that.
He could have just said...
The reason that situation has emerged over the last couple months and came to a crisis situation is because the Attorney General directed that 100% of misdemeanor illegal entry cases be prosecuted. The result of that was that because those parents were then put into criminal prosecution realm, the children were separated as a practical matter. I think that this entire thing happened because there was no actual policy for how the Border Patrol was supposed to handle the families, for whether or not it was even legal to take children from their parents. And so now what the president has done is he's signed an order, and we'll see what's in it. It may allow the children to stay with the parents for some period of time, but there also are other restrictions on how long families are allowed to be detained.
There are restrictions we're all starting to talk about. I know a lot of lawyers know a lot about this Flores settlement decree, but I understand there's sort of this 20-day cutoff, and at what point, I mean, this could be challenged.
Sure, could be challenged in court. I'm not a lawyer, you are.
And so what I think, part of the difficulty, I think, of the recent scenario was that because there was no written policy, and particularly because the Secretary of Homeland Security stood up and said there was no policy and played the semantic game as if there wasn't some kind of policy, that actually made a legal challenge difficult because there was no document to challenge. So if you take, for example, the travel ban, there was a sloppily drafted executive order that then lawyers and advocates could say, here's all the things that are wrong with it. Now that's what advocates are going to be able to do with whatever document was drafted in a day.
But let's be clear about this.
Okay.
This was a crisis of their own making.
Yes.
This was ad hocism at its very worst. They didn't
anticipate this national
in this
outcry.
sort of zero tolerance policy. We're going to be tough. We're going to be strong. We're going to use it to negotiate with Congress so we can get our wall and we can get everything we want.
As leverage.
And it backfired on them in a huge public, disgraceful way. Disgraceful.
So why is Kirstjen Nielsen standing there, the Homeland Security Secretary, and saying, ask Congress to do their jobs? This, again, first of all, it's a Republican majority in Congress, A, but B, it's not about Congress doing their jobs. Is it not about, back to your original point, the president could end this today?
She's still playing this semantic game. This is because they have a legislative agenda, and it is absolutely an abomination to use children to achieve a legislative agenda. And that's what she's doing, and she did it the other day when she stood at the White House podium, and she's obviously continuing to take that tack. The Attorney General, the reason this happened is the Attorney General issued a memorandum to the U.S. attorneys who are the ones who actually prosecute these cases. I was a special assistant in Dallas many years ago. These kind of cases in the Southwest were not prosecuted because the U.S. attorneys were focused on real criminals.
Right.
They have limited resources. They don't really want to prosecute first-time illegal entry cases if there's no other criminal aspect of the individual. And so to separate the children and then create this crisis situation, this all happened because the Department of Homeland Security and the Justice Department did not actually do their work in advance as a policy matter and put in place how they were actually going to implement this new policy.
Well, because this was all about showing muscle. This was all about we're going to be tough, and we're going to be so tough, tougher than anybody else has ever been, and we're going to use this as a negotiating ploy, as a way to get Congress to also be tough. But thinking through this policy and to how it would affect these children and how they would house these children and where they would house these children and how they would be separated from their parents and what the public outcry would be.
But they did not anticipate.
They did not anticipate. They were just looking at what they thought would be leverage for them. And in fact, it wasn't. Turned out to be the opposite.
And they didn't do any of the work. You know, governing is hard. I worked for administrations of both parties, implementing new initiatives, serious executive orders. This is hard work. It's usually something that takes, you know, months of interagency work and White House lawyering and all the agencies involved, and it takes a lot of work. And they just think that they can throw something out there and give a direction and that it's actually going to work, but it affects people.
But just so I'm clear, to your point, and it was under, you know, back in the day for you in Dallas, but it was under Bush and it was also under Obama, where if you were a first-time illegal crosser, right, you were not prosecuted and put in these detention centers such as we're seeing, and that's why we're seeing the numbers that we are. But when we're talking about this, when you talk about the AG and the zero tolerance policy that went into effect April, May, where every single person crossing, is that still in effect? They're going to stop everyone still. It's just a matter of putting the parents with the kids.
Well, we'll see what this order says.
That's what we don't
So
know.
that's one of the big questions.
But Trump will say, he will then be able to say, I have not changed my policy. But what he will say is, but I also didn't want to wait for Congress to act, because you know how slow those people are. So what I'm doing is this, temporarily until we see Congress do the right thing. But this way, the president, in a way, believes he can have his cake and eat it too, because he doesn't have to say, well, I reversed myself, I made a mistake, zero tolerance was a problem.
Got it. Welcome to Washington, ladies. Carrie and Gloria.
No, you're welcome to Washington.
Here I am, and this is how they roll. We'll wait to get more reporting on exactly what the substance in that executive order. But for now, ladies, thank you so much for going through that with me.